Hi and welcome to another posting on my YouTube channel. Firstly, Happy New Year to everybody that's on there. I discussed in my last video I put up about this Land Rover I've been working on for some time, and so like I explained, I will be crossing between my Mark II Jaguar and the Land Rover. Just want to try and keep some more content to my channel, and I thought this is as good as any to put into it, I think. So today I'm going to go around and I'm going to show you what I've done on this. I've spent a bit of time on it, but it's just bits and pieces. Generally every Saturday with my son, we've been working on it. So I'll show you what I've done as best as I can and explain it, and then I'll explain in a bit more detail about where I want to take this. So if we go around the side, we'll start with the chassis, because that obviously was the first thing I had to assess, was the damage on the chassis. So in my video I first showed with this, there's a pile of rust. So I'll show you pretty much what I did to actually repair the damage that was on it. It was all the lower half of the chassis box section, so we'll go and we'll have a look. So what we've done on the chassis. First, virtually every outrigger was absolutely rotten to death. On this front outrigger here, which holds the front of the cab up, they'd boxed it off to hide it. I'll insert some pictures. I'm sure I've got some pictures of it when I pulled it apart, and it was just virtually disappeared, was this outrigger. So where the chassis is welded, where they originally joined the two box sections together, well, the two sections to make a box section I should say, and welded. So all that I cut off, ground it all out, and I rebuilt all of it and put it all back up. So pretty much from about here virtually to the back axle is where it's been completely had a new section put in. So outriggers, all new outriggers, all mounting brackets, bumper mounting brackets, front bumper, that's all been done. The bump stop outrigger, that was all rotten. I've had to rebuild and replace all that. And if you look with this outrigger, this side here, same thing again. The mud flap mounting bracket, this outrigger, all that was rotten. I've done some repair in this box section, just little bits and pieces, nothing serious. I was going to change it, but I didn't feel it was necessary. Where the winch mounting, it had rusted a bit, but it was quite alright, was that. So just the winch pulley needed stripping and cleaning, some new bearings, which I did. So then if we move further over here, so the outrigger from the back, like I say, all this had rotted away. The chassis, all there, all the way across there. If I just move the tank, not the tank, the jerry can. If you have a look under there, same thing, all the way around to here. Suspension outrigger, that had all rotted away pretty much. Somebody patched it up, which looked pretty bad. It wasn't worth it. Well, it was dangerous really. So all new, everything. It's all new outriggers, cross members. Same with coming into the back here, and it came to about here, just before this bump stop, where I had to finish it because everything else it was pretty much okay. Same thing again, bump stop outrigger, that was busted, that had to be replaced. So I did all four of those, and then in the back here, part of the rear cross member is the spring hanger as well, which I changed. So it's got a whole new cross member on the back. The chassis ends were good, where I put the cross member on, so there was no need for doing any work on the chassis ends, just some cleaning up, and then like I said, I put that back on. So if we go to the back, we'll have a look at that. Right, so rear cross member, so like I said, it's got a whole new cross member. These rear bumpers, there was a little bit of repairing to do on those because water obviously getting down the back of them, it's corroded and some quite heavy, so I had to cut bits off and I replaced it and just re-welded it all back in. And that was same with the winch bumper there as well. It had rotted quite heavily in there and at the back, so a lot of repair work there. The NATO hitches, they were all seized up. I've done a lot of work on these, stripping them all down and re-greasing and getting those right. NATO plug, I believe it's called the NATO plug for the trailer. Had to repair that, had a dinking. You can see a bit of damage there, it being dinked in, so I had to do a bit of repair on there to do that. And then yeah, we'll go to the front, and I'll show you the steering box, of which obviously all the mountings for the steering box there were all wrecked as well. So I'll show you what I did down there. The steering box, it's a standard steering box. I'll fully overhaul this. The worm drive for the actuator for the sector shaft, that was okay, there was no wear in the bearings. I put new bearings in just as a matter of course, but there's no play in the box at all now. So actually I was surprised. I was expecting to find a lot of play in this box on the actual worm drive for the actuator, but it was actually quite good. So that's good. Now, those who have played around with 101s will know to get the box off, the arm is on the other side of the mounting bracket, and there's a special tool. Now, how you get that tool in and pull it off, I have no idea, but I didn't need to that because pardon me, this thing virtually fell off. It was that badly rusted. So what I decided to do was make it so it was attachable at the bracket itself. Pardon me. So what I've done is, if you look carefully, you can see there's two brackets there, and they're fastened to this, obviously this outrigger, and then the bolts come through the actual plate which would have normally been welded onto the outrigger. So I've got 4 bolts mounted at one side here, and at the other side I've got another 4 bolts mounting it to the bracket which is on the chassis. So to take the box off, I don't have to get the specialist tool to get the drop link off, which for me makes a lot more sense. I don't know why they didn't do that in the first place. The proper machine bolts, machine holes to take out any plate that might be in there or might have been in there. So it's actually a really rigid structure. There's no movement on this at all, and I don't envisage any being in the future. Plus I'm going to modify the steering setup, which I'll go to in a little bit of detail. So my job, in the R&D department for a steering company, I specialise in overcoming problems in steering remanufacture. So I design tools and certain things like that to actually strip down units and reassemble them if we can. So with knowing steering like I do, I'm going to modify I'm going to get another box, so it'll run with this box on and its standard steering until I get all my bits and pieces together. But I'm going to make it hydraulically powered, but I'm not going to use what they normally do with the Defender boxes, where they're chopping all this out and they're putting it all in a Defender box and they're linking it all up. I think it's a poor design and modification, especially with all the linkages, because it's a forward control. What I'm going to do is I'm going to develop a ram system which will be mounted to the axle, and I've seen a couple of pictures of people doing that on different four-wheel drive applications. But the control will come from the steering column to operate the ram. So when there's a resistance on the wheel, so it'll retain its all original linkage, but it won't be doing the assistance, as it were. The ram, which is on the axle, will be doing the assistance, but it will control from the actual steering column, because that's what we're measuring, the resistance. So if we go now and have a look at the axles and sort of thing, and then I'll show you what my ideas there and what I've been doing with the running gear on this. So axle, obviously. The steering, which I'm going to do and which I'm talking about putting a ram on, will be mounted. There's the two displacing, or I'm going to call them displacing holes, for the axle. To take the diff out, you have to displace it to take the actual diff unit out. I'm thinking of putting mounts to those points there, because obviously that will be the strongest part of the box. not the box, the axle I should say. So the ram will come across there and it'll be attached to this bottom control link here, which goes from obviously left and right hand side. So I'll get away with all the linkages and everything, which gives assistance, and that way I'll have a proper hydraulic controlled steering on the actual wheels, instead of running through all the linkages which the Defender boxes are doing. While we're down here, the running gear, me and my son have rebuilt all the running gear, so we've gone over it, we've pulled everything out and apart. It's all been resealed, all new bearings where it needed. There was some damage on the near side. I got a bit of damage on the CV joint in the near side. I put some new balls in it, which seems to have helped it out a lot, but it really could do with the new joint really. I don't think it'll last that long, but we'll see, because it is quite a sizable unit. I did try and get it reground by a company up near Sunderland, unless it was in Sunderland, but anyway, they said when they got the unit, they said it was too big for their machine to grind, so like I say, I reballed it and put it back in. So axles have been done, all the brakes, they've all been done, all new line, new slaves, all new pipeline, brake pipeline, all new high tensile bolts. These bolts for clamping the axle back to the leaf springs, 12.9 grade high tensile bolts. I tried to find what grade it was supposed to be, but I couldn't, so I just went the hog and it was still the 12.9 grade. So yeah, they're and that's the same with the back. So if we go to the back, I'll quickly show you the back axle and what we've done on there, and then we'll go and have a look at the gearbox and the engine. So back axle, rebuilt all the back axle, same thing as the front, bearings where they're needed, all new seals, slaves for the brakes, new lines. The drums, they were perfectly fine, just needed a bit of a clean up because they've been stuck for so long, but I just put those on lathe at work and just polished those up with a bit of sandpaper. It was just easy that way. The diff covers, both of them, they'd got some holes in, and instead of binding, I just welded them up and felt them back up. And then I painted this one white, which is supposed to be white apparently, and it's got a NATO light up inside the chassis here, which I won't even bother showing because it's so hidden out of the way, but whole new NATO light to light up the back axle. It's I forgot what they call it now. Anyway, you'll know, but it's got a light in there to light up the back axle. It'll come to me. But so all that's been done. All new brake lines put in and properly mounted up, so they're not pull tied up and all that rest of the mess which you sometimes see people doing. Convoy light, it's the convoy light, yeah. The loader portioning valve, rebuilt all that. I had to make a bracket because somebody'd stolen all this, so I bought that from Able Engineering, do all the Land Rover stuff. So where I got all the cross members and outriggers and things like that, all from Able. There was only one cross member inside the chassis which they didn't provide, but I made that up. I've got a big box pan folder, so made all that up and re-welded all that in with a few added betterments, let's call it, for getting water out because it was just a tray. Anyway, so all that's been done. The whole thing's been rebuilt. So right, let's go and have a look at the gearbox and the engine. So engine and box, because we've done the whole running gear, so I wanted to go through the whole thing. I had heard on a number of sites for 101s about rumble when they decelerate especially, and they were saying because of the sharp angle of the prop shaft. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go through the whole thing. I want to find out exactly what this rumble was. So yes, the prop shafts do have a sharp angle, but the UJ should have no problem really coping with that. If they are sharp, and put a UJ through that kind of work, it's a lot of work, but if we've got good UJs in, that would obviously get rid of rumble, but I've heard people saying that they still rumble. And I'll go through what I think I found at the main problems with this. So anyway, the prop shafts are all being done, all new UJs. The slip yoke that goes into the prop shaft, check those, make sure there's no heavy play on there, because I think that could cause a problem as you decelerate, as the slip yoke tries to move around on its spline, so that could be a possible problem what some people may be having. But rebuilt all those there, all good. The handbrake on the back of the box, well, let's put it this way, the whole box has been pulled apart. Me and my son pulled the whole box apart, took it to work, shot blasted and aqua blasted it all. Made sure everything was all nicely clean, because they've got a little oil pump in these to lubricate the actual box. I thought they'd lubricate the whole thing and then transfer box, but they don't, which is strange, it's just splash fed. But anyway, so gone through the box, checked everything there, all new bearings and seals in it, needed it. The problem what I found in the transfer box is what's called an intermediate shaft, which comes in from the back here. So the gear outputs that you have on the output shaft of the gearbox comes onto an intermediate shaft set of gears, and then that comes to the actual main high-low ratio on the output, where the diff lock, axle lock, diff lock is sat in. Now the intermediate shaft, all the shafts a needle bearing run for the gears. In normal running gear, those that's pulled it apart will find that the intermediate shaft where the bearing runs on the main high gear ratio, the bearing is loaded because it's a helical gear, and as it's loaded it wants to twist it off, so it's loading the needle bearing onto this intermediate shaft, and it cuts into the intermediate shaft. And I'll show you one after I've done this little bit to show you what happens. That could possibly be another cause of rumble. So that's what I found with that. I have come up with a repair because the shafts are crazily expensive if you can get them, and I think most people are just leaving them as they are. I've not heard anything about people changing the intermediate shaft in the transfer box, but that is a cause of concern, because that gear moving around uncontrolled, you know, is not a good thing. So that could be a possible point of rumble. Anyway, new clutch in it. The engine, the Land Rover, I'll put another clock in, I think it had something like 14,000 kilometres or something like that. I hardly had anything on the Land Rover. I certainly don't think it's been clocked. A friend of mine who worked in the army was in Remy. He said he'd seen a number of these before they decommissioned, and he said they hardly did anything, these vehicles in army, and they regularly replaced units, i.e. the engine and boxes and things like that, just to keep them maintained or something. So when I took the engine and box out, I thought I'll just go over the engine, because it appears to have been stood for a long time. So the engine, I didn't take the heads off. I turned it over, pulled the sump off, checked to see if there were any damage. It was absolutely immaculate inside. I was actually quite surprised. Even when I bought the Land Rover, expecting the first thing to be seized up was the engine, and it wasn't. It turned with no problem whatsoever, just with a big spanner on it. So it's never been seized by being stood still. It's always been free. So that verified it when I pulled bits off of it. So sump, perfectly okay. The actual liners in it, you can still see the cross hatching from the honing of the bars. You can still see that. It's hardly done any work. So I changed the cover over, which goes over the camshaft gallery, and it's part of the induction manifold gasket as well. That had been leaking, so it was good that I pulled that off. So obviously all new gaskets where I needed to put the thing back together. The carburetors, when I got it, some did broken top of the dash pots, so, and there were bits missing, so I just got another set of carbs, found another set of carbs, which came off I think it was a V8 lightweight, Series 3 Land Rover, I think. But anyway, so another set of carbs on it. They look good. I've gone over those. They're quite happy. This is a 12 volt GS model. It does have what appears to look like a 24 volt distributor with the thicker cable covers, and they normally have these special plugs where they screw the HT cable onto the top of the plug. This has got caps, normal what I call steel caps, but they are properly mounted to the cable like the 24 volt system, but they're actually 12 on a 12 volt normal plug. So yeah, that was interesting when I built this. I put in this as well electronic ignition instead of messing around with points. The 24 volts got 2 sets of points in, and I didn't even want to go down the avenue of playing with ours. I've reconditioned the alternator, went over that, checked that, that's all quite alright. At least cross my fingers it will be. It seemed to everything checked out when I got the meter on it and that. The radiator, that's original, that appears to be okay. So we'll see when we get to temperature if that pops it or not. The heater box was rotten to death. So my son made the heater box. That was his first attempt on the box pan folder, and they made an absolutely splendid job of that. So the heater box, that's all new. All the levers and linkages and things, cables, they're either new or we've reconditioned them. Those that's into the 101 Land Rover as well will also notice this setup here. This isn't original. Somebody's modified this at some point. Now I don't know if it was done in the military or if it was done when it came into civistry. I have no idea. But normally you've got a big long lever here, and it's this joint here is normally mounted there, but they've moved it right over here. So the engine cover, that's all been modified. I am going to re-weld it. Well, it's all screwed together and riveted and stuff, so I'm going to actually clean it all up and TIG weld it all, because it's an aluminium cover, and TIG weld it all together, so it's actually nice. The dashboard, that's all been stripped down. I want to check all the switches and everything, and I've changed the speedo from kilometers an hour to miles an hour. So that'll probably just want a slight calibration tweak, which I'll set up. I'll get my sat nav and I'll calibrate that inside to corroborate the sat nav speed. All new cylinders, masters in it. I put a bigger, I managed to break the servo, the original servo on it. I pressed the pedal down and I've taken I've taken something and I pressed it down, and I took it too far, and the servo like drum inside the body is some kind of fibre, and I broke it. And for the price of one of those is just mental. So I looked at different Land Rover forums and seeing what they were doing to upgrade the brakes, because a lot of people are upgrading the brakes to disc brakes on here. And I found that there's I can't remember which one it comes off. I've got it written down somewhere, but the servo's slightly bigger. So I thought I'd put that on. It needed a bit of messing around, so I had to make a few new brackets to mount it in. But it's got a bigger servo wing now, so I should have more assistance on the brakes, leaving them as drum. So I don't think you'll be yanking on, because somebody had been driving this at some point, had been yanking on brakes, and they'd bent some brackets and stuff. They'd been pushing that hard, trying to get the thing to stop. Goodness knows what they were trying to stop it. But anyway, so it's got a bigger servo in as well. And all the electrics we've gone over, checked, knew where it's needed to be put in new. So yeah, all that's been done. Also, because I'm 6'1", sat in this 6'1", I'm literally on top of the steering wheel. So what I've done is I've moved the seat back. So I've moved it back probably 6 inches. So I've moved this back 6 inches. I've tried to, well, I have retained the actual width and everything in it just by moving it back and making a few alterations with the seat plates and things like that inside and the mounts. But everything is back solid as it should be. Also, the seat belts, I welded some plates up here instead of being mounted down to here. So it came over the shoulder there. I wanted it to come across better. So I welded some plates onto this roll cage here. And so they're mounted both sides so they're higher and better that way. I was going to have something that slid up and down so it could be adjusted, but I thought, nah, that's a bit over the top. So yeah, that's where we're at with this. One of the things I'm going to do, this is a GS model, I'm going to make this into something like a radio body. So when I've got all the running gear and everything, it's all finished and done and dusted and I'm happy with that, then me and my son will be working on the body. I have some ideas in my head. I've been doing a model in CAD of the vehicle to draw some shapes and everything and see what it looks like scaled, and from that I can get my dimensions for cutting material and that sort of thing. I am having 2 spares on this vehicle. I was originally going to have them where they would be sat in the roof here and they would fold out, but the size of the wheels, the width of the vehicle can't accommodate 2 wheels side by side, so I'm going to have them just over the rear wheel boxes, so they'll be slightly sat out, proud a little bit, probably, I don't know, maybe 6 inch, and the same thing, they'll fold out, holding the wheel, they'll lock the wheel into place, into the body, so they can't be stolen unless they start chopping up lumps of steel off the vehicle just to get to wheels. So they'll be locked in, they'll come down, they'll hold the wheel, any work you need to do on the wheels, inner tubes, anything like that, that'll accommodate all that sort of stuff, so you'll not be playing on the ground. So there's a lot of reasons why I'm going to do it that way, and it keeps them nice and tidy, and it means that I can do lots of other bits and pieces on the side of the vehicle as well. So that's where we're at with this. It's been a lot of work, but I think it'll be worth it when it's all done. It is a standard 3.5 litre V8. Yes, they are heavy on gas, and I have said if I can afford to run this thing, it is crazy. I know a lot of people go to LPG, have thought about that, but I wish to keep it petrol and we'll just see how it goes. It's not going to be maybe my normal day-to-day run, but I certainly want to use the vehicle, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted this, is have a laugh in it, and it will be a workhorse when I need to have it as a workhorse as well. So I was mentioning rumble, and I nearly forgot this, which I think possibly is the main concern for rumble when decelerating. The CV joint that's sat in here, there's a brass bush of which it sits in, it rotates in it, and then it obviously comes to the actual hub itself. It's fastened into the hub, the nose of the CV joint comes into the hub. This bush carries the weight of the CV joint, and I think that could be a possible point of where as you're decelerating, the CV joint is literally rumbling around. That, I would think, if the CV joint's a good joint, that bush will be the probable cause of the rumble, which people are unable to find in these units. I'd have thought they'd have had a bearing in, but it appears it's just a bush. I'm not sure if it's phosphor bronze or brass, but it's certainly a concern which I spotted, which I thought was a bit crazy really, but that's a possible cause as well with rumble. And obviously your CV joints, because of the swivel pin housings where they rust and leak, water getting in, that's what had happened to this. Some water got into here and done a bit of damage to my CV joint and some of the bearings. So this side was the damaged side, the other side was perfect, but this side was somewhat damaged, and that's why we needed the CV joint. And so that's one thing to think about. If you've got rumble you can't find, it could possibly either the CV joint's wrecked, which is the normal cause of any CV joint noise, but also the bush it sits in when it's mounted into the hub assembly, because if that's loose, the whole thing's going to rattle around inside there as well. So that's a probable cause. I think when these things are right, I don't think they made any noise whatsoever. I think it's just with the wear and tear that they go through, and obviously the age of which they are, which actually these things start showing up quite prominently. And because it's such a Meccano type build, you get noise through these things everywhere. So I think once it starts going, it will show up really quickly and really easy, because there's nothing really to silence these things from making a lot of noise once they start going. So those are the things. Intermediate shaft in the transfer box, CV joint, the bush, and obviously if you've got problems in the prop shafts, in the UJs. But those are the things I'd look at. Hopefully that's given you some idea of where we are. Obviously I've done lots of stuff on it and I can't really show you because I haven't done any videos of it. And I decided a couple of months ago that I would do videos on this, as well as my Jaguar what I'm building, and just try and get a lot more interest to my YouTube channel and give somebody something to watch. So hope you've got something from this. Hope you continue to keep your eye on this channel. I'll probably, hopefully every other week or so, put a posting up, but it depends on what I'm doing in between the two vehicles I'm working on as to how much content I either put on this or the Jaguar. But hopefully it'll be an alternate Jag one week, this the next week, and so forth. So anyway, thanks for watching those who've watched, and have a good one, and hopefully we'll see you later on.